us with some a room change and some technical difficulties, but we are underway now. So we'll go ahead and start with roll call. And then we've got an agenda today that is just kind of information sharing and informational. So we don't need to do our conflict of interest disclosures. We don't need those today. So we'll just do roll call and then we'll dive into our agenda. So Dale.
Present.
Okay. Ben Valkenburg, Don Copper.
Present.
Hank Kamakala. Okay. James Teeter.
Present.
Jeff Baker. John Fisher.
Here. Hey guys.
Joining us online today. Hello, John Hyland.
Halen, yo!
Catherine Austin.
Here.
And myself, Corey Harlan. And I think that takes us through the list. And then we have some ex officio members joining us online. I see Rachel Colton, Sarah Odendahl, and Eric Lint. Anyone else?
Katie Brooks.
Oh, and Katie Brooks.
This is Katie Brooks. I'm just listening. Sarah's the chamber rep today.
Welcome. Thanks everyone for being here. Okay, well, we are going to kick off our agenda today. We thought it would be a good timing for this group because we do have some new members as we're kicking off the year to just have an update on some core area projects and hear a bit more about what's happening there. We know that there are a number of things that have kind of come online and then have sort of maybe lost a bit of momentum or have been sidelined for various reasons. So just wanted to get an update on where some of those projects stand. And we thought that might be a good place to get started with this group. We had a bit of an orientation last time and just trying to kind of cover some bases there on what we can take a look at in terms of current and future core area projects. So that's what we're starting today. And
Or is it okay if I just, Mike Riley, City Councilor, I'm gonna start trying to attend these meetings regularly. I was at the last, that overview meeting, partly because I'm just getting into the chair role, but I think it's important for me to be here as you guys talk about the central district, but also as we start to talk about it, potentially expanding that role right across for all three of them, the community. So I'm gonna try to attend. I know Gina is technically the liaison, but it seems important for me to try to make these meetings when I can. So
yes,
that's why I'm here.
Well, sorry, I'm welcome.
Yeah, just fine, but
Sorry,
mostly listen. I think Corey and I've had some discussion about some ways that we can improve communication back and forth with council. I won't try to do any of that today, but before the next meeting, we'll make sure we start some of that stuff.
Yeah, and congrats on being the chair of Borough. That's going to be an exciting role, I think. And then as mentioned, Gina Francosa is our new council liaison for this group. But she could not attend today because she had a conflict. So she will also, I think, try to be in attendance pretty frequently, I think is her intent. So yeah, that'll be another face that we can see in the room here. Okay.
So you're going to be the first up for the project
Okay.
subcommittees from last year. So I'm going to turn it over to you. That was Ally's work in the subcommittee.
Right. Well, thank you. I talked to Pauline Hardy this morning, and for those of you who don't know, she writes all of our zoning code. And she had been tasked at the end of our last group of people. We had Dale, wasn't it you, John, and I were the subcommittee, and we had a testimony from 3 different projects that had gone through the process, and they talked about what the stumbling blocks were and some of the issues to it. And we had asked staff to look at some of those issues. The only one that's actually come back, according to Pauline right now, is the issue of design review for existing buildings. And that was a big stumbling block for a number of these projects. In fact, the one project that is a food pantry, they wound up diminishing their design in order to avoid having to trigger the design review. And so the result was we got a less pleasing project. And so that's a totally counterproductive when the design review is supposed to issue. And so Pauline is hoping to get some direction from us today on which direction to go. She's given us 2 options. One is to exempt existing buildings in the core from design review at all. And the other is to raise the threshold from 25% of the facade or roof to 65%. Now, as an architect, I feel really strongly about this. I think we should exempt them completely because it was a stumbling block. It resulted in a poorer design. And honestly, commercial buildings require an architect to be involved. And I just feel that there's no real risk for us to eliminate design review in this case. I think we should encourage as much improvement of existing buildings as possible. That's my opinion only, and I would love to hear other people's thoughts. That does not eliminate design review for new construction. It's just for the remodeling of some of the existing buildings. And another thing that came out through the testimony from the three applicants was none of them understood the process at all. They were starting from scratch. They were totally overwhelmed and things kept coming at them, and this whole design review thing just added a whole other layer of complication for them. And so I think if we're concerned about any negatives, I think if we eliminate design review and we see that this is causing a problem, nothing's written in stone and immutable, we can always revisit the issue and maybe reintroduce the idea of design review. But I think at this point, I would recommend that we take the option to eliminate it, but I would love to hear, actually, especially Dale and John, who were in the subcommittee and also heard the testimony, maybe start and then see what other people feel about that. Would that be okay?
Oh, yeah, great.
Yeah, I would lean that direction too. And I haven't looked for a bit, but we did have like specific design standards in the code for the core area that were outside of the regular design review process anyway. So yeah, I mean, that was kind of my thought at our meeting that we had, is it's like we need to raise that threshold or eliminate a threshold at all for redevelopment projects.
Yeah.
So yeah, I support that.
You know, because a new construction, you can start fresh, you can do whatever, you can have some exciting designs. You've got an existing building, you've got a lot of constraints. And everybody that's coming in is wanting to improve their business, right? Bring more people in, they're only going to make it look better. So, John, do you want to have anything?
Yeah,
to
thank you.
say?
I would agree, Kathleen. I think the key is that most of the existing buildings are not buildings that are going to be there for 100 years. We're looking at remodels, tenant improvements that are kind of in between infill projects that will beautify the area in the immediate. And so making that as easy as possible was part of the goal of that subcommittee, and removing that requirement, I think, makes a lot of sense. And I think it is low risk. So I would agree with everything you said there.
Does anybody else want to chip in and give your opinion? I know it's a new topic for you, but if you have anything you'd like to say about that?
I fully support removing the design review for existing buildings.
Mhm.
And your second point about it being confusing about what they had to do, the city has put together some like flow charts for like use about what you need to do. So I think just like a simple graphic, a one-page graphic about all the steps you need to take in the core area,
Mhm.
a flow chart would be really helpful to anyone that wants to do anything.
Yeah, that's a really good suggestion. I think we had talked about that is at one point, there was going to be someone who helps people through this process. I'm not sure where that stands right now. But in lieu of having an advocate to help people, maybe some sort of flow chart would be a good thing. Did you?
I would absolutely agree with removing the constraints. We're just going to beautify the area.
Yeah.
Like you said, they're not going to take a ugly building and make it uglier. They're going to
Exactly.
beautify and bring people in. So
Is there anyone else, I guess?
Not seeing any.
Not really. Okay, well, that's good. So I think the direction we should be giving Pauline is to take the option is to just remove the design review for existing buildings.
So Catherine, is the idea here that, so this has been bounced off of the CAB in general, we'll have another meeting with
Well, Well, Pauline, she has a conflict. She may be here within 15 minutes and we can ask her some questions, but I think what she was hoping, they had already had internal discussions at staff. And this was the one thing that they wanted to move forward, and all she's waiting for is some direction from us is which of the two ways to go. And then she's going to go that way. So I don't think she would be coming back for another meeting on this. I think this is the direction that we're giving.
I was just wondering, the subcommittee wise, I mean, great idea, the devil's in the details, and
Yeah.
I'd like to look at the draft language.
That's up to this committee, so.
Yeah, I mean, we could definitely, is that something that causes a problem with meetings if it gets mailed?
Yes.
It is,
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, if you're going to have a meeting and the subcommittee is going to review something sort of on behalf of CAB, that has to be a public meeting. Can't happen on email.
So,
But if individual members wanted to look at the code and then as an individual member, not to come up with a recommendation on behalf of CAB. That could be okay.
Okay,
But not if it's to do any business for CAB.
I'd be fine with that. I would just like to get the opportunity to review it.
And procedurally, would it just be that Bura reviews the language and accepts it? Does that take approval, or is that something staff can just do?
So staff would create a draft proposed amendment to the Ben development code. It would go, I'm assuming, it would go, it would, right. So I think that would be what we're talking about is Pauline drafting amendments to the Ben development code based on this direction from CAB. That would go to the planning commission first for consideration and then to city council.
Right, thank you, okay.
and
That's,
since we don't meet that often, I hate to hold it up for like another 2 months or so, if, I mean, if you're comfortable just reviewing it and giving your feedback. I don't know.
Well, notice requirements, and I mean, it's gonna have to go to planning commission,
Yeah,
then city council. I think somewhere in that process, it could come back to us and we could write an official letter as CAB to city council.
Yeah, that
If it's post planning commission.
would be good. Yeah, that
so,
makes sense.
so March,
So when the draft code is packaged is moving forward to planning commission, schedule it for consideration for a letter of.
Letter of support,
Mhm.
yeah.
Would
I
would
did
planning
have-
commission get some sort of a summary of what the findings of the subcommittee is recommending? I mean, it was such a rich discussion. I would hate for that to just get dropped on them without much conversation.
Pauline mentioned that she did have quite a few notes from our meeting about this particular issue. I don't know about some of the other issues, and I'm just about to bring one of those issues back up, but it would be good to have that background and maybe have a representative from this body be there for the planning commission.
Well, I think my question, so as far as like the design review discussion, right, that discrete issue, it seems like there's good consensus in this room anyway, and that was sort of the emergent, maybe sort of like top barrier that came forth in the subcommittee discussion, but I know you looked at a number of other things, right? And so I guess like my question just had to do, like, do we think any of those other ones are impactful, could or should be bundled, right? Like, rather than sort of popcorning these out, like 1 or 3 at a time, right? Like, do we need to kind of have a more comprehensive look of saying, yes, this one was emergent as like a key barrier, but in this sort of cast of characters or other issues on the table, which other ones really feel like they need some time and attention?
One that came up to me, and I talked to Pauline, but she was saying it was kind of a different department, was the issue of until we get area-wide improvements on the streets and the sidewalks, there's a barrier for ADA access to some of these buildings of considering, say, an asphalt path that meets ADA compliance, but isn't the final product. So it's a less expensive, because I think one of the buildings had this issue that they couldn't get into it because there were steps and you needed, or there wasn't even a sidewalk, I suppose. And the cost to do a concrete sidewalk is so much greater than just doing an asphalt path. And knowing that ultimately that whole swath of the street section was going to be redone is allowing an alternative approach on a temporary basis. And that was something that I felt could really be looked at more closely. It seemed like I got a lot of nods of heads from the staff when I mentioned that. And so I was surprised that didn't come back.
Mhm.
And I would think that that might be something. Now, it may be with all the improvements on Second, it's not really that much of an issue anymore, but I mean, there's First Street and there's others, there's side streets. I think it could come up, and it would be nice to have the flexibility to address the access issue in a way that doesn't go full bore city street standards.
I think it was the easy one to do.
Mhm.
You know, the others are a little more comprehensive, but
Yeah.
I mean, one of the discussions we had was, things that are building code related or ADA code related. City really doesn't have any ability to change those requirements. I mean, they are what they are. But the trigger for design review or maybe even site plan review, and that's kind of what I'm curious about the amendments, is at what level does site plan review get triggered? Because that's once it has to go through land use, then all of a sudden you're on the hook for all kinds of things,
The answer to,
which is why I'd like to see the draft.
yeah. Very good point. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. But to your point, I think there are other things that got discussed that would be nice to bring back up to the surface.
Mhm.
But as of this morning, this was the only thing that came back was the design review.
Would you be willing to meet with me and bring me up to speed on the subcommittee stuff? And then that way I can help filter this back up to the group because I'm coming in after everything's kind of done. And so if it's okay with the chair, continue moving forward with the code and then work with the subcommittee and bring back the other recommendations.
I mean, I think so, right? I mean, it sounds like, and I, wasn't on that subcommittee, but this was part of the work that this body was really trying to, take care of and get into last year. And so I think it was a little hard to sort of keep momentum, and the frequency of meetings was challenging, right? But hearing from John and sort of hearing from the folks who put in that time and energy, we don't kind of want to lose that good knowledge and discussion. And I think it's just, what Jonathan and I talked about was like, having some closure, right? Of like, we're either going to move this thing forward or, for these reasons, we're going to kind of set it off to the side and carry on. And so just having a little more closure, because that felt like it kind of, just needed to be a little bit more like buttoned up, that all that effort that happened with that subcommittee.
Would it
So,
be possible to have the subcommittee meet? I don't want to be the only person giving you the input on this. If we have like a interim meeting of just, John and Dale and myself with you, it would be a public hearing, I guess. But at least that way we're getting all the input, because I don't trust that I'll remember everything. The path of travel is an issue I deal with all the time in my work. So that one popped out to me.
Yeah, Ally took really good notes,
Oh.
so I can touch base under the direction of the chair. That's
Sure.
if that's the consensus of the group, and then bring back the findings back to this group.
Is that with the three of us or just?
The subcommittee will meet with
Oh.
myself and Elizabeth, and
Okay.
then we will bring
Okay.
back the findings for whatever the broader committee wants to do.
But we can still move forward with Pauline with removing.
I hope so. Sooner the better.
Yeah,
It's been a long time since we
Yeah.
talked about it, and it's a pretty easy fix.
right. And I think just with this, the current market and just some of these bigger residential and mixed use projects, needing to find their footing and kind of, stalled a bit now, this adaptive reuse piece is really more important than ever, right? Because we need to find other pathways for things to start looking, feeling, being different there. So I agree. I like that plan. Sort of let's roll forth, right? Pauline came back with it. She wants direction. That's great. But let's kind of button up some of these other, potentially good ideas that I think are going to help kind of address the barriers in this realm that we agreed would be a good thing to lean into. And then either, put them to rest to the side or actually move them forward in some way.
that sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you to the subcommittee for the work on that.
I mean, I think council's gonna want to know like the summary of the issues and what the obstacles were, sort of how it showed up. And then too, if there is any legal precedent issues we have to think about, obviously, I know that's where you're gonna go, right? But we have to worry about that or not.
Yeah, I'm not, it just kind of depends what the
Yeah,
changes.
the specifics are,
The specific recommendation.
double in the details.
Yep.
I thought the testimonials were really powerful, and those tenants did a really good job preparing and sharing their experiences. And I just thought it was amazing that the head building official was there and listened to all of it and began to really digest what the goals are for the area. So some of these things are going to have a hard time showing up on paper, and they're going to land a little bit more culturally than I think they will in the Bend Development Code. But to have that discussion together with staff, I felt was fruitful no matter what ends up changing in the code.
Okay. Great. Well, I think we've got a good, clear path there. Thanks again to the folks who put in the good time and work on that. Do we want to,
We have one more update for Franklin and Second Street
okay,
has been requested, so
great.
Todd.
Cool. Yeah, so I just put together a slideshow to talk about the status of where we are with Second Street. If you haven't been down there recently, if you have, I'm sorry. And if you live and or work there, I'm ultra sorry.
I thought you were bringing up, I think, a chocolate to pass around.
That is a good.
Next time.
Just to make sure, everyone, can you see the shared screen of the Midtown crossings? Okay, perfect.
Yes.
And then I can't see folks raising their hand or anything like that, Jonathan.
I'll help you.
Just, yeah, keep an eye on that. Thank you.
And then, yeah, go ahead. Just talking like, this is the budget that I showed to council when we went for the Franklin design amendment. That $1.5 million design amendment that gets us to 100% design on Franklin. This is a progressive design build contract, so we're kind of just like rolling through these projects with K&E. We have a class 4 estimate, which is on a scale of 1 to 5. Class 4 is like sort of still, back of napkin level. We'll move towards class 1 as we continue in design. But generally, yeah, we're looking around that like $15 million area for the construction on Franklin. Yeah, go ahead. Status, also, there's Greenwood, that's been completed. We currently have a feedback going, asking for feedback from the community. We've gotten like 1,500 responses. We have a little billboard posted at Wall and Greenwood. Yeah, then Hawthorne is, I think, kicking off design with ODOT in about a month, and they're targeting fall 27, fall 28 for construction. Put an asterisk there. It's managed and run by ODOT. Second Street is under construction. We're anticipating completion May 25. So yeah, a couple of months here. And then Franklin, we're currently between 30%, 60% design. One of the things I want to point out here too, we're working with Bend Bikeways, and so they're doing the design from 5th East to 8th Street. And what we're likely going to try to do, just to coordinate construction a lot better, but is to try to construct 4th to 8th with using K&E. So that'll mean some of our design, some of their design, and with kind of the ongoing construction right now, we're targeting the fall for that construction, really late fall, like October, November, where we'd be kicking off. But east of 4th, we do not want to touch the Franklin undercrossing right now. Period. Full
Over my dead body. Yeah.
Is K&E the consultant or?
They're a contractor.
Okay.
So the way that
Design build
Progressive Design
contractor.
Build, Dowell is our primary contractor. Second Street, Hickman Williams did that design. Dowell will be doing the design for Franklin. And then Kittleson was primarily more involved on Greenwood. Again, yeah, so Bend Development Code, we're following what's in the Bend Development Code for Second Street, the vision here, and we'll move into photos of where we are right now. But yeah, generally travel lanes with parking and sharrows for bicycles, and then there's landscaping areas with street trees. A lot of stormwater work too, which we folded in. And earlier we also did the water line replacement for Second, which was a lot of hammering through lava rock. The lay pipe that was functionally sitting on rock, and like we hammered 15 feet away and we had a pipe rupture. So it's fragile. cast iron pipe that has been replaced. Now we're anticipating.
Okay, sorry, just one sec. We have a couple of questions, just we can't see them, but so it sounds like Sarah, you've got a question and then we'll go to John.
I think it's probably all of us.
And-
The PowerPoint's not advancing for folks on the Zoom. We're still seeing the title slide.
Oh,
Same.
Yeah, that's why I was having my hand up too.
Okay, I figured that was why.
Yeah. I figured he was
Maybe-
advancing.
Not out of the
Thanks.
woods yet
Yeah,
on our
sorry to
technical
disrupt you.
challenges.
Oh, there we go. All right.
That works great.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Okay, is it moving now? I'm just gonna go through a couple of slides.
Yeah, you're good.
All right.
And then, yeah, so we are constructing out there. We have curb and sidewalk going through Hawthorne now. Primarily constructing on the east side of the roadway. And you can see, I mean, that's gonna be our landscaping area. Back of walk is property line there. And so we'll be grading back. We have 5-foot construction easements that we're gonna kind of make the property owners right. Putting in curb ramps, pouring tomorrow. You can see the foundation for a light pole there as well. So we'll have PP&L, so 20-foot, 25-foot lights at the intersections. It's 2 of those. We put in future conduit for like pedestrian scale lighting. So 10 to 15-foot light poles. The city won't be putting those in. It's sort of anticipating the formation of sorry, Cyrus, I keep messing up the
Economic improvement.
Yeah. And then they'll be the ones that can run, maintain, be billed for that power, et cetera. I think there's 22 spaces for those in our current design. Right here, I wanted to point out, you can see like the Hawthorne intersection, that sidewalk. We're raising up it's not a raised intersection, but we're raising the profile, the elevation of the Hawthorne intersection. It's gonna make, number one, the bridge landing a lot better when that is built. But then we also are putting a raised pedestrian crossing at this intersection. So on the south side of that leg, there'll be a raised kind of speed hump, speed table crossing for pedestrians.
So as a pedestrian, is that you're gonna land on that sidewalk at that level, the new one?
The whole road's gonna be up there.
Okay. That's where you kind of daylight hit grade on the bridge.
Oh, on the bridge. Well, the bridge will be on Hawthorne, and I don't think they have the exact landing. The target's to go west of Bottle Drop's current driveway because we've closed their, I mean, that's an absolute must because we've closed their driveway on Second Street, or will be in the near future. So their access is going to be off of Hawthorne and through the alley. And that's been kind of the primary design for a lot of our construction here, maintaining alley access where businesses can then access via the alley. Yeah, again, schedule. So we did the water line work. August, finished that in October, started the road work in October, anticipating completing in May. I've heard rumors of potentially a party and ribbon cutting.
We'll talk about that later.
Franklin Avenue, yeah, we're at 30, between 30 and 60% right now. We'll be going through right-of-way actions fairly soon on 8 properties, adding 5 feet to the existing right-of-way there. There's a couple there's one development agreement with the Les Schwab site, and then Brooks also, we're trying to start that as well to get a development agreement. Other fun things, yeah, BNSF coordination, like we put in that bridge for SHPO determination, it's eligible, so like that's gonna go through landmarks. We'll talk about kind of the design of that railing. We're rebuilding retaining walls. 3 out of the 4, although technically the ones on the east aren't retaining walls, they're just rock. But yeah, just really trying to make wider sidewalks, a detached bike lane. We heard in our open house feedback that like these kind of two landscape strips were preferred, so buffering pedestrians from bikes and bikes from vehicles.
So Todd?
Yeah.
So I should probably disclose my employer is Brooks. So,
Okay.
I mean, and we own the property on
The part,
corner
no,
there.
so we got your letter, like I think generally we're trending towards doing that. It's again, like, yeah, the development agreement,
The on-street parking.
the on-street parking stuff, yeah.
Yeah, the concern that, we have and I have as a CAB member is that we're making a really good corridor for cars and bikes and pedestrians, but not really a place people are going to stop and patronize businesses and want to stay there. So it kind of perpetuates the problem, but just makes it safer in my mind.
Yeah, and when that happens, like we lose landscaping, so that's kind of the trade-off with that. It's like we lose the ability to put in trees potentially.
Can I ask if the property owners put trees on their property outside of the right
They
of way?
can definitely do that. Absolutely, yeah, 100%.
I mean, so maybe there could be an encouragement to, coordinate that in some way, it's like, well, if we need more parking, we're losing some trees. Do you mind adding in some more trees in your development type of thing?
Yeah.
Well, tree
And I
wells
mean,
on the
they are
sidewalks.
more,
Yeah.
they're more
And
likely
that's,
to
yeah.
be maintained. Yeah, private.
And that's one of the things we're talking about too, where like maybe we have an 8-foot walk or a 6-foot walk, and we're willing to shrink that to 4.5 or 5 feet and like punch that tree well into part of the pedestrian area. It'll still be an accessible route. The pedestrian access route is still there, the width. But that gets us a little more space for the trees to grow. So
Yeah.
we're working through all those design details. Yeah, the other, and like going to the next slide, like we are talking a lot about the storm mitigation. So I'm gonna start hammering on this message. That's a pun. But like the amount of dry wells that we're gonna put in the undercrossing to try to, mitigate flooding events. There's certainly like upstream things that need to be made as well, but yeah, we're proposing quite a bit of stormwater facilities in the undercrossing. We're talking about replacing the water line in the undercrossing. So what we're proposing doing here is, yeah, certainly impactful.
Can I ask, what drainage considerations you're proposing for the pedestrian walkway, the mouse holes?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because it would be sheet flowing and it's probably like weep holes down the retaining wall. I don't think we've gotten to that design level yet. But if the catch basins are adjacent, like on the outside of the travel lane, then we can push water over the retaining wall or through it and under and connect.
Oh, my concern is the sidewalks filled with water.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, it might be running, maybe there's minor catch basins up on the sidewalk level and drain. I mean, similar to what like bridge drainage looks like, right? But that's a good point. Yeah. And I mean, part of this project too, it's a lot of, we can't really touch the undercrossing tunnels. It's too expensive. So a lot of it's to make it visually more appealing. There's kind of a hump in that sidewalk if you've walked it, but we're trying to open it up and make so that like a person walking on the sidewalk can look down into the tunnel and see what exactly is going on down there to potentially help out with the safety.
Like a through sight line.
Yep.
Yeah.
Far enough away that you have time to run.
Yeah, and then the other like there's sort of EMS considerations too. Like I've walked through there and there's been overdoses and like access for people to get to people and those things. We are also, I mean, ODOT has since closed off the walkway that's going between the parkway and the rail, and we'll formalize that closure as well. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot more design detail stuff that is coming, and we'll yeah. I don't know what our next check-in or what date is, but I'll figure that out.
Okay, folks, questions, comments? I can see folks online again, so if you have things that are top of mind or you're seeking clarity on.
Ask about the Second Street.
Yeah.
Is the center line gonna be straight?
On Second Street, it's a good, no, it's only at intersections, I believe. We don't have to go any more way. It might only be at Greenwood and Franklin. That's what I think is happening. Yeah, I don't think that's center line straight. It's almost, I don't know if the width is like it's not technically a queuing street, right? But the thought is that the parked vehicles, et cetera, should make traffic slower and that like a share is an acceptable treatment for the low stress network.
And does this group have the opportunity to weigh in on raised crossings over the local intersections?
I can tell you what engineering's perspective has been, is that like it's not a standard right now. And I think maybe more of the push is if Hawthorne's developed to like get it as a standard and put it on Hawthorne rather than Franklin. We looked at turning movements, like it's a real hard beat, you know, these local industrial roads, looking at like the turning movement of the trucks that we're anticipating, it's really challenging. Even to put we're trying to get an 8-foot pedestrian refuge island at Second and Franklin, and like it's sort of our design is not to, I forget what the terminology is, like accommodate rather than design for. So it's like even the design vehicle that we're designing to, it's going to be hard for them to make that maneuver. And with the raised crossing, it's hard as well. But yeah.
Todd, can you describe to us a little bit what a raised pedestrian crossing is? Is it like a speed table
Like a
kind of
speed
thing?
table, yeah.
Okay.
Sort of like by Columbia Park, right?
Yes, yeah. That's what's going.
I assume, I just wanted to
Yeah,
make
that's
sure.
what's going at, that's what's going on the south side at Hawthorne.
Okay.
But what James is talking about is like putting those at every intersection generally.
Yeah.
For the
Crossings.
the truck turning movement, I understand we don't have like a network analysis that says we're gonna allow trucks here and not here.
Yeah.
But if we're moving forward with the approach that we're allowing big trucks everywhere, on Fourth Street, we also have a pedestrian refuge island. And I saw that pedestrian refuge island had been moved away from the intersection.
Yeah.
On a order of like 30 feet in order to accommodate that truck movement.
And it was also talking with CDE as well. Like they had big concerns about it as well. I have concerns with it too. The southbound, so that left turn going southbound on Fourth, the volume, and I wasn't expecting this, but vehicle volumes are the same basically northbound and southbound lefts. So there's concerns that if we put that there and take away the turn bay, that like we're gonna cause more backups on Franklin for left turning vehicles because they would be stopping in the travel lane. So we still have a bit of design work, probably going back out to public to get feedback on it. Like I don't think we have trying to just figure out what to do there. I know we put it in there because of Bend High, like we were thinking pedestrian crossings and the access to that and getting over to Safeway was the important thing, but yeah, we need to still kind of work through what's going on there.
I guess I would like to ask that this group has the opportunity to weigh the pedestrian versus pedestrian movements versus left-hand movements versus, moving that refuge island just slightly out of the intersection so that we can accommodate trucks, try to find a happy medium. If others here are interested in those details.
Yeah, I mean, I think so Dale, I know you had a comment as well, or question. I think, so it's like you show us a 30 to 60%, right, is where we're at on Franklin, right? There's this question of, and I think it's a strong voice coming forward from our community about like, hey, on-street parking needs to be a part of the final design. It creates this kind of friction and stickiness, right, that we're trying to achieve here, right? Like, how do we do that on balance with the improvements that we're talking about for like bike peds? So I think that was my question of sort of like, what's the process from here for the city of like, it sounds like there's going to be some other iteration. Like there was another open house on Franklin. I think it just wrapped. I can't remember how long ago, but what's like next in terms of like, how do we go from the 3060 to the next iteration with some of these additional considerations that have come forth from the community? So I've heard a lot about like those elevated crossings. I've heard a lot about parking, right? Like, we're not going to be the end all be all decision maker, right? But I would guess that this group probably wants to sort of like put forth some ideas or, you know, thoughts about what that might mean for the district to borough to consider. So that might be helpful to hear from the city of sort of like what's next for the process, right? And how do we sort of stack in there so that we do have the ability to provide some input there that's sort of in sequence with what's happening in that broader engagement, because I've heard it's been challenging to kind of have designs go to the community, come back, do another iteration, come back, do another iteration. And so I think we should be trying to sort of on-ramp and streamline so that we're moving these things forward in timely fashion, because I know we all just really want these things to go and to be done, right? And done well and completed sooner than later, particularly for Franklin. So be helpful to hear how that integration might work.
And can I add one more thing to your list too?
Sure.
The right turn lanes at Third Street. It's sort of thinking about the implementation of Greenwood and the bicycle lanes there. And the purposes of the bond to improve east-west travel. We're moving forward or anticipate moving forward, still maintaining those right turn lanes, but we've also heard a lot from community members, et cetera. Like it's a balancing act, right?
Yeah.
So Todd, to the chair's point, what is a better way to incorporate existing cab members' feedback on
I think
transportation design that
writing a letter.
I think they want to be a little bit more involved in writing a letter. So let's try to
we can.
How you and I touch base, and then I'll bring back a suggestion in March.
Yeah.
For this group.
Todd, also, and to your point, Corey, and something you just raised, Todd, is this is a project that has funding sources from different places that could potentially have different limits, right? Different primary aims. As Todd said, the bond money that's going into the project really is about, you know, increasing those east-west connections and improving connectivity. And there were multiple aims for that bond money, and maybe CORE's money had the primary focus that's slightly different from that primary focus of the bond. And so what the team is doing, right, is taking this feedback and trying to come up with like an amalgamated project that does the best it can to meet the objectives of these different sources of money. So I think the helpful, perspective, right, is CAB is contributing and borough is contributing this portion of money that has these kind of sets of aims. And this is kind of our feedback to help the project sort of meet some of those aims with the borough money. Right. And then that's going to have to be balanced against the other portions of money that are going to the project, which maybe don't have precisely the same top priority, and melding that all together. So I think keeping that in mind, it's not purely a borough project, and it's going to have, right. And so where's the tweaking and the input from this group about how to make the project meet or focus on the aims of the money that's coming from this with the aims of meeting those goals set out in the core area plan. So, but recognizing it's all gonna be balanced, right?
Sure. Yeah, I just hope this group has the opportunity to weigh on, do we value left turn movements? Do we value cargo trucks? Do we value pedestrian movements? Which we all do, but to what degree and where? And having the ability to provide input on values.
Yeah, Dale.
Well, I have a different comment, but just to kind of on this topic, I think the primary goal of CAB and borough here is really how do we get private properties to redevelop so that we can get the get the TIF funds going, so we have more money to spend on projects and then entice more development. And I recognize that is in conflict with the bond. I mean, the bond was corridor, but from CAB's perspective, it's like, no, we want to make it a place that people will invest in. And I think that's kind of where you get a little bit of inherent conflict between council's goals, which is we have to implement the bond, and borough's goals, which is how do we get the most out of our investment in this economic improvement district. So, but my comment was actually going to be on Hawthorne. And can we go back to the picture that we had there? And I know you said that ODOT is designing the bridge and the crossing. The city's got a design for Second Street. But once that bridge hits the ground, who's designing that? Because I think if we land with what's shown on that picture, if the bridge finishes and that's where you come off the bridge, it's going to be kind of tragic. I think it would very much be a bridge to nowhere if we don't do something a little more inviting with Hawthorne. And I think it's probably this group that really needs to spend some time thinking about that.
You don't think a bridge to the bottle drop's a good idea?
It'll get a lot of use.
Yeah, I think this brings up an issue that I've mentioned to a few folks, and that I continue to think we need to try and elevate in some way for council, right? Which is this idea of what's happening on either end of that bridge, right? And there's been talk of Drake to Juniper and that kind of connected corridor that doesn't have a place in the CIP. It doesn't have a line item on the budget. It's sort of been living over here with another kind of very small time limited grant, is sort of where exploration of like what that corridor could and should or might look like. And I do feel like seeing this timeline here, right? Like there's some things to think about in terms of what we're trying to accomplish from a cab perspective that I do think we need to press a little on to say, what is the game plan for putting together the route here, right? Like does this have a home and where does it live, right? And I know that didn't get mentioned yet, but there's also everything going on with the federal funding freeze. And from what my understanding is, there's a big question mark on when and if funds are coming in. And I don't know if there's new updated information to share there, but that is like a big question mark, right? And I think it's something that we should take into consideration, but we need to assume that it will be moving forward until we hear that it isn't. And what I am starting to be concerned about is sort of this narrative that we have heard, right? Which is this is a bridge to nowhere if we don't have this kind of vision and corridor of how folks are going to move safely through this, right? And how they're going to get from place to place and how it can be the kind of amenity we want and expect it to be that is used, right, by lots of different folks. So I don't know where that fits in this conversation. I think like that's part of why it's nice to be starting the year, starting with new kind of crew, having Jonathan here as our new staff liaison. We have the opportunity to kind of shape some things for this group that we want to dig in on and talk about that we think are impactful. But I do agree that I think that is one of them.
Wilson.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay. And that might actually be a really good segue. So I've got my eye on the clock. We've got a little bit, like about an hour left to get through two remaining agenda items. So we've got our 2025 through 2027 investment strategy overview. I think this is a doc that was shared with us, and I hope folks have had a chance to kind of dig in and take a look. I don't want to sort of bring the core area project piece to a close yet if folks have other questions or this conversation bringing up other ideas or thoughts from the group. But let's, kind of move over to that next agenda item here pretty soon. So Kathy, yeah.
I just wanted to mention that Pauline is with us, and I didn't know if you were intending to stay for a whole meeting or if you just wanted to hear what the direction was in the first part of the year. Yeah, we already talked about it.
I was like, oh, I can wait to the end.
It was a pretty universal desire to eliminate the design review.
Okay.
And I didn't know if you needed to get going. I didn't want you to have to sit here for the whole thing. If I communicate tonight, Jonathan will communicate more to you, but.
Yeah. There was a desire to look at drafts or a draft and be able to comment as the subcommittee or the entire committee at some point in the process, either pre-planning commission or post-planning commission.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And I can't see any hands online. Did any you folks say, okay. And Councilor Riley, anything from you? You're good?
Use them back.
Okay.
Note that in the minutes.
Good. Okay, well, then I think we'll go ahead and wrap that up. Sorry, I'll just sort of answer my own question. One other thing that I think would be nice for this group to hear more about is, we have the platform at the Schwab site, right? We've got the Brooks Resources Project, right? That, folks may have noticed, like the building is no longer there, it got torn down. So I do think that while I appreciate, what city engineer was able to share with us, I do think maybe just some updates about like, here are some potential projects, right? That like at one time had great momentum. We know are still, still there, but to hear a little bit about what maybe some of the struggles or constraints are about why those may not be moving forward, or maybe they are, right? And so I think maybe just not for this agenda, but for next one, hearing a little bit more about like what some of those other projects are and sort of what their status is might be another sort of good like level setting just for this group as we kind of kick off. So just a thought there. Yeah.
I think it was very helpful for the subcommittee to hear the constraints that property owners, redevelopers had with these small projects. I think it would be good to see if we could get Tom Cody or to actually say, what things are preventing you from moving forward. And it may be nothing related to what we can do, but it'd be good to know that.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Good. Okay, well, we are gonna turn it over to you, Jonathan. Thank you for walking us through the investment strategy. And yeah, looking forward to good discussion here.
So last night, Borough gave official direction to start official solicitation from the Core Area Advisory Board and BDAB on the broader investment strategy that we're proposing to work on. So this is a draft. This is not a final document. This is a living, breathing document until June. And so we're hoping that what we're proposing today is a foundation for your future discussion in March, April, and May. So the investment strategy is supposed to be a short-term guide for the Urban Renewal Agency and by through CAB for the deployment of resources in our TIF areas. Right now, your focus is solely on the core area, but as we get into the investment strategy, there's that opportunity for the expansion of that role. The first proposed guiding principles, we want this strategy to be strategic, sustainable,
Second, folks.
Hey, Sarah, she's informed me. Hold on. We're just gonna do this. Can you see that? You see this, what I'm sharing right now? Okay. Thank you. And to those online, I sent this in an email, but I will send this document to you for further review. Today's just a general overview. So we want the strategy to be measurable as well and align with existing priorities and efforts. The proposed focus areas of the strategy is on housing development, entrepreneurship, infrastructure, business, land development, and beautification and enhancement. We've identified four different area types for investment. So research, 1 year or less, short term, medium, and long term. The first strategy is housing development. The proposed 2030 goals are 1,000 multifamily units constructed, and this is borough focus. This is not the city. We will get into that at the actual breakdown of housing development in the future. 250 units are rented at 90% AMI or less, 3 energy efficiency projects, and 30% local contractors. The proposed vision for housing development is quality and sustainable housing is available to every resident across a broad spectrum of types, styles, and sizes in current and future TIF areas. The first strategy that we are proposing is we want to continue to invest in all housing types that align with the City of Bend's adopted goals and policies. And some of the initiatives are continue to explore and implement and refine our housing rental incentives, explore homeownership funding opportunities, and continue to monitor the housing market. So some of the current programs that we have the site-specific program that CAB weighed in on last year and recommended to borough for adoption, which was adopted last year. We are currently in the middle of consideration. So it's to continue to encourage new multifamily unit construction while also providing more affordable units for households earning 90% AMI or less. And in addition, we want to further incentivize expanded affordability, supplier diversity, energy efficiency. Last year, both borough and CAB and BDAB saw the annual housing market study, which I will send to this group after today. It utilized real market data regarding housing and employment Borough can leverage those resources to continue to meet those needs based on location, household and occupational needs, financial feasibility, and to continue to tailor those policies to assist the city. And a new proposed program that will require multiple levels of policy development, reiteration, and also approval by Borough if they want to move forward with it would be home ownership funding opportunities. So when the conversation of the TIF program for site specific was going on last year, one of the key things we heard from our community members was, what about home ownership? And so we want to start using that TIF model to see if we can replicate homeownership opportunities. This is very preliminary. We don't know the financial feasibility, implementation, but we want to be able to recommend not only to this advisory body, but also Borough to start looking at these opportunities in the future. An example of those programs could be a revolving loan fund, interest rate subsidies, and land banking. Entrepreneurial development. So one of the key goals of council is to start focusing on economic development and prosperity. And so some of the proposed goals that we're considering are looking at as maybe helping 10 new startups, providing $200,000 of loans being distributed, and building a catalytic fund for each area. So last year and the year prior, with under Allie's leadership, you guys were talking about doing kind of like catalytic investments in the area. Open space was one of those conversations. So we want to rebuild that conversation again and focus on like what type of investments you want to make in the area. How do you want to create that program? And so basically looking at how does the local market and entrepreneurial ecosystem work in the core area and also in our other TIP areas, explore small business funding opportunities, and then just plan, identify, and invest in those projects in the long term. So all this is new. So this would require further policy development by both this board and Borough, but we want to do a neighborhood market analysis. So this year, under Cyrus, we're doing a target sector analysis. So we'll bring that back to this group under the land development. So you get to hear about some of the target sectors. But one of the things that Allie and I were working on last year is how do you incentivize those community businesses that build that sense of place and where's the need at? So we would focus on retail, commercial, and vital services. So one of the things that we've heard from our Borough Council and this group, for example, like childhood services, right? We're hearing pharmacies are struggling right now. So we want to do an expanded market service assessment and to see where we can invest, recruit, and retain those type of businesses. Small business funding opportunities. An example could be a small business revolving loan fund, something that's self-sustaining. That way, get out, it pays back in, it helps more people. And like I said, a catalytic investment fund.
Question. Have you involved or been invited in the business district, the business association there? Have they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're starting to filter that outreach back out.
Okay.
We just had their first meeting.
The Central District Business Association?
Yes.
Yes, yeah, and Dawn is part of that board as well.
Oh,
so-
okay, good.
I'm actually the treasurer.
Okay, wonderful. I just mean, it just seems like they would.
I know.
Every
Every time
Yeah, I feel like that's.
door, they're like, here's. the
Okay,
trouble.
good.
What are you gonna do?
And obviously, infrastructure is a primary goal of CAB, Borough, and the city council. So this one's probably going to be the one that modifies and changes a lot more over the next couple of years. But the baseline, we want to provide 5 miles of pathways, which is pedestrian, greenway trails, all that stuff in our TIF areas. Provide reliable and sustainable systems that are present and accessible to everyone that supports economic development and quality of life. But some of those key criteria we need to start focusing on is how do you identify experience and development? How do you provide and enhance those existing connections? And then just general development of the greenways. So right now we have the Franklin undercrossing that is currently under construction. So that's a goal, is to complete that. And then a couple of new proposed projects that we'd like to begin the conversation is how do we identify opportunities that Borough CAB can invest in for non-motorized use paths, so bicycles, pedestrian walkways, et cetera. What we're hearing both in the community and also from just basically developers, small business owners and also our engineering department is potentially doing a South Bend Central District broader improvement area, which is focusing on First Street and the sewer line adjustment. We've identified that as a hindrance to future area development in that bottom area. So we bring that back to CAB and Borough for broader conversation in the future. And then this morning we met with Todd, Mary, and Cyrus. So in the future, when we start doing more of these projects, some of the businesses have asked, it's impacted our business. So we'd like to potentially build in a construction impact fund. So kind of like what we did during the pandemic. Sometimes these small businesses got 2 to 3 months worth of rent paid for. So we build that into the project cost. We only have one business right now that's requesting assistance. So we'd like you to take a look at that in the future and maybe potentially make a recommendation to Borough. And then obviously, when we get into the CAB member portion of this, you get to add to this. So this is just the baseline of where we're beginning. Business and land development, this is the bread and butter of urban renewal. So we really want to maximize the opportunities of creating new capital in the city of Bend. So that helps not only fund our basic civil services, but also provide opportunities for jobs. So we really want to focus on parcels in the TIF area that have not been developed, and then just identify and invest in those eligible properties. So not only do we have the site-specific program for housing, we also have it for employment growth. So we've tied those two together. So basically how this works, for those that are not familiar with the site-specific program, we did that policy analysis last year. So we identified that 90% AMI is where people start becoming cost burden in the city of Bend for multifamily rent. And that equates to $72,000 for a household. So basically we create jobs that provide $72,000. So that way it kind of balances out. So we don't want council or borough to spin their wheels on incentivizing one area and making the seesaw tilt in the opposite direction. We want to do a land capacity assessment. So basically we're going to help Damien prepare for the buildable lands inventory for the growth plan and identify how do you do a market analysis? Not just does that land developable, what could it be developed to? We're going to recommend to Borough next year to purchase some of the remaining city-owned land in the Juniper Ridge area. One, it will help offset some of the needed revenues for the general fund, but it also provides the opportunity for Borough to have a little bit more broader flexibility on developing that property, because we can use it as an asset to bond against, the city cannot. And then work with EDCO or whoever we decide to partner with on a business retention and expansion strategy for those particular parcels. And then beautification and enhancement, which I think is a very big priority of not only this group, but also of city council. We want to identify a number of square footage improvements we would like to make by 2030, and also the number of linear feet of streetscape improvements. So basically the goal is to make every part of our tax increment areas welcoming to both current and future residents and businesses. And then some of the initiatives are streetscape enhancements and facade and landscape beautification program. And then the broader, just administrative things that we need to do for the next year is we want to update our governing documents. We want to look at expanding this advisory group's focus and role. We want to plan for investments in the northern employment area, which is the Empire area and also adjacent to Juniper Ridge, because one of the things we have to focus on is SB 8, which allows affordable housing on industrial parcels by city-owned land. If we don't improve the transportation on Empire and the adjacent lands, we are limiting our traffic impact to be able to allow that. So we've got a couple of things that we got to work on to get to Juniper Ridge, like in terms of transportation, in order to fund future development in the area. And then we'll work with Cyrus on expanding the target sector to focus on the supply chains within those areas. And then that will just be more of administrative staff work that we'll conduct.
Is that obstacle really about the Empire corridor and the improvements?
It's one of the
parts
here.
Yes,
So the ODOT realignment that the new realignment of ODOT, that's what is the intersection? Still learning intersections after a year and a half.
Well, they were a little confusing.
Yeah. So
Somebody should do something else.
Yeah.
a coulee, the intersection, because Borough has 775,000 for Cooley Road extension in the Juniper Ridge area, Roball Road and Empire Avenue. So we've got a couple of, because it's both the east, the west, and the north.
The robot to the west.
And when we do a work session on that, this group will bring actually in the transportation experts.
We get to a point where we can't do a bridge until we feel.
That's right, there's an existing.
Triggers.
With ODOT that's has some triggers about trip counts in Juniper Ridge, and when you reach the right trip counts, it triggers different improvements, and if housing is going to be a use up in Juniper Ridge as allowed by SB8. That's gonna trigger those things more quickly, so that's where we start to look at. Is urban renewal a source for some of those improvements to continue the development up at Juniper Ridge? And then if this group expands to be not just the core area advisory group, but in this group and many others, advise more broadly on urban renewal as a whole, that would be part of the conversation that comes up.
So the next steps, last night Borough directed staff to start soliciting feedback from our advisory boards, others have directed, so they've also included the environmental and
Climate committee, yes.
Okay. And incorporate any additional feedback. So from February to May, we're going to be working with our advisory body groups. We are now starting to talk. Councilor Perkins made a suggestion last night of doing a broader advisory body summit over these kind of areas. And so we're thinking about May. Originally, the idea was to bring this back in May for borough approval, but we're thinking about pushing that out to June just to allow for more public involvement. And then on June 4th, bring it back to borough approval. So the interim work that we requested to start on from borough that they gave their approvals to is to start beginning the reformat of the site assistance program. So we have a site assistance program in Juniper Ridge, and we have a development site assistance in the core area. One of the things staff would like to do is to combine those to make them equitable in terms of what you want to do for residential, what you want to do for commercial, what you want to do for industrial. That way it's the same program, but implemented in all areas. So you'll get to work on that. We want to start doing a plan analysis for Juniper Ridge, Murphy's Crossing. So for Juniper Ridge, we are starting to hit our stride in the redevelopment of that area. One of the things that we know is coming up is it's a 15-year plan length that will end soon. And so we're going to ask borough to consider expanding the district's length and maximum indebtedness to continue the successful work that has been done up there so far. Murphy's Crossing, we want to begin the conversation of, is it time to terminate the district since we're not doing anything with it? And then the northern employment areas. Now for the core area, the financing update, we've got a lot of financial models out there that staff has worked on over the last 5 years, and we need to clean those up. So we're going to work on that. So that's not really anything pressing of the core area. It's just to make things easier for Dan and his team in finance. So, and then obviously the advisory body update. So the next portion.
Sorry, and by that you mean kind of this body, our scope to be inclusive of all the TIF area URAs.
Yep.
Okay.
And because this body is both a borough and city council adopted group, and it's also in our code, it's going to require not only policy development, but code changes as well. So there's some work to be done. And speaking with legal this morning, Elizabeth, our goal is to potentially have a reformatted group by October. We'll present that to borough in June. If they give us the go ahead, we'll start on it, but it takes some time to policy develop.
Question.
Then policy development is the conversation with you.
Yeah.
Question on that, since we're all kind of got on this group focused on the core area, will we recruit some additional members who have?
That would be the suggestion.
Right.
And like I've been told both from CMO and also our city council, the core area is still a priority, but we do need some citizen oversight for the urban renewal areas. And so it's just, this group is now familiar with urban renewal, and it would be my suggestion to utilize you guys. But the core area is still a priority.
I would think that a lot of us have crossover. I mean,
There is.
in those areas.
I mean, maybe there's a way to look at a subcommittee kind of, or,
Yep.
you know, approach.
It'd be nice to have like somebody from Les Schwab or something.
Right.
Some of those business owners up there.
For sure.
So this is the first I've heard of like retiring the Murphy. Now, is it Stillwater Crossing that's in, is there an opportunity for anything else to happen there?
So that'll be a part of this analysis. But we're limiting on land without going into the county.
Uh-huh.
And if we go into the county, that requires an official vote. Commissioners spend. So we don't want to go down that path.
Yeah, I understand. Okay. I guess.
But during this plan analysis and determination would be, are there really opportunities to either expand the district, to do other things, to do more things in the existing district, or just to say, there's no more capacity, let's retire, because we pay off the debt for the Stillwater Crossing infrastructure in 2028. So let's see. So,
Interesting.
but that's a preliminary discussion. But it also frees up the acreage valuation and limitation for ORS 457, which we are required to follow. Because there are, in the long-term future, climate-friendly areas that may need assistance, additional assistance. We're trying to play the long game for Burn Council and this group for funding.
So it allows us to pick a different area,
It will,
possibly.
yes, it just frees up the allowance that you could use in the future.
Because it's up to 15% rate and we're at roughly
7.
7 now, so.
Okay, it would just allow for a different area possibly, or,
Yeah, essentially.
okay.
And that doesn't mean that we're doing that. It's just, or you could. Yep.
So we have about 40 minutes left. I just want to make sure, because I think part of what we wanted to do the overview, but I think something that is really crucial for this group today is to ask questions, give ideas about what they're seeing in this investment strategy here. And then also, and it's come up a little bit organically, and we've already heard some things that this group does want to spend some time talking about and working on in the year ahead. And so it's a little bit of sort of like, let's make sure we step through the strategy, right, and capture some good thinking there. Are there other things that we really specifically have an interest in taking on as a group? And then I think we mentioned this at the last meeting, but I think we'll just repeat it now. We had moved to a pretty like not erratic, but just a much less frequent kind of quarterly schedule. And I think given what's coming with our shift in scope, given that we're having sort of this kind of renewed strategy in front of us with and I think most people notice a lot of new things, that it is going to be more appropriate to be shifting back to a monthly meeting for this group. And so don't want to make the assumption, but just wanted to let folks know. I know that we've talked about that, but the cadence of this is going to go back to a much more regular kind of monthly. That's kind of how we're envisioning it moving forward, given all the things that we talked about today. So are there concerns about any of that? Does that sound okay to folks? That's what we've sort of where we started. We kind of slipped into a more quarterly pace, and now we're going to kind of come back to a more monthly cadence. And does that work for everyone? And I can't see anyone online, so just let me know if there's input there. But any concerns about that, or does that sound okay?
It's okay with me. I'm worried about Jonathan.
Everyone's worried about.
Well, and that you were hired to do a job and now you're expanding and taking another job. And monthly meetings is going to be, if you're setting agendas, preparing, that's going to take a huge amount of your time.
Yeah, so once we get through the site specific, mine and Elizabeth time drastically, well, I'm not going to speak for Elizabeth, but for site specific, it's.
My only. Thank you.
So,
Appreciate you.
but this is important work and I'll make it work. And Council Riley has also pointed out, I think, the chair has said the same thing, is starting to have regular monthly, quarterly meetings with the chair and vice chair, probably scope some work with the chair and vice chair of CAB, and then you and I would meet monthly to prep the meetings and stuff like that. That way, kind of want this group to be more of a working board in the interim. So kind of like the subcommittee did and stuff like that. Because Ally was just one person as well, and she was backed up with a lot of stuff as well.
Right. And I think this is responsive to the input that we've heard from this group, which is sort of like we feel a little underutilized, right? And I feel like this is very responsive to the feedback that we've heard collectively from folks of like kind of like put us in, coach, right? Like we're ready to kind of like take on more, right? And so I think that's what this proposed kind of shift is about, right? Is being responsive to what we're hearing there. And I think putting the good knowledge and experience and, you know, wisdom in play. So I'm seeing head nods, so I appreciate it. Seems like we're kind of on the right track with that. So
I'm with you, Corey. It sounds more productive to me to increase the frequency.
Thanks, John. Any other thoughts from folks online? Okay.
Increased frequency, but also okay with flexible times. Like, I don't think we always need to meet for 2 or 3 hours. Like maybe one of them is a 1 hour meeting, and just adding that I'm okay with the flexibility and the length of these meetings as well.
You know, and if it makes sense to skip a meeting because you're just not ready or there's nothing, I mean, that's fine too. Or go to 6 weeks instead of, I don't know. I mean, I'm totally.
Or if we need to do 2 times in a month because there's just a whole lot, then
Yeah,
whatever.
whatever seems to work.
Figure it out.
And that'll be part of that advisory group roles as we can evolve that into the next group, but we can also evolve that with this group.
But if we need to have an extra meeting one time because of.
Yeah, I think
extra
what
stuff.
I'm hearing is sort of, and I see Sarah, your hands raised, that there's a you know, it sounds okay, and also being flexible, right, and sort of, you know, responsive to kind of what the path looks like as it unfolds. So I appreciate folks being willing to bring that kind of flexibility to these meetings. And Sarah?
Yeah, I was just going to comment. I think that so a lot of our time has been spent in like foundational grounding and education, which is awesome. But I feel like once we have that foundational grounding, the meetings will evolve at a faster clip, and there can be more information that's shared ahead of time. Like the report that you shared ahead of time, Jonathan, was awesome. So people can come like with their thoughts, like at least like 3/4 of the way formed, and it can be an active working meeting as opposed to a learning session. So I think that'll happen with some time here, and hopefully make for some more efficient use of everyone's time and maybe some shorter meetings.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Okay, great. Anything else before we jump to input from the group on what was just shared with us? I think what we'll start is just if folks have questions or specific feedback on any of the strategies that we just talked about in Jonathan's presentation. So let's start there. Anyone have thoughts to share?
But work for the facade improvement and somewhat of a critique of the business assistance program that has already gone through.
Okay.
In that the business assistance program, I support it, but I would have hoped that one of the criteria would have been like, how does this assistance impact the neighbors around you? Which I didn't see in there, and I see that as parallel to the facade improvement, that okay, we're gonna give out money to a certain business or landowner, and really what we're looking for is just that it improves the whole area. And so whether it is facade improvement program or a business assistance program, I focus will be on what does this money do for your neighbors?
I would wonder how you would evaluate, to be honest. I mean, I don't disagree with the desire, but I just wonder how you document that, or, I mean, other than saying, oh, well, it'll encourage my neighbors to improve as well. I mean, it's sort of a nebulous thing. Did you have something specific in mind?
I mean, I think, to me, lighting, even paint, these things that contribute to the visual, the aesthetic, things like improved mechanical systems for a building, they're important, but they don't add to your neighbor.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So something that it isn't necessarily an internal. So my problem with that is that a lot of the businesses are hampered because when you start making improvements, if you don't meet current code, you have to do everything. And so some of the more expensive things are making the bathroom ADA compliant and getting your path of travel to it from the front door through. Like a lot of these buildings had steps at the front door, that kind of thing, so that those are sort of invisible to the neighbors, but it's critically important to any improvement that takes place. And it's not really a facade improvement, but it's a necessary improvement that people don't necessarily see. A lot of times, like in mechanical systems, people don't see it at the end, but they're really critical. New plumbing, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
I see John's hand up too. So what I might suggest is this is sort of folks putting their own ideas and responses into this document. I don't know that any one of us should feel like we need to respond other than say, I agree, or I'm not quite sure I'm with you, just so we kind of get collectively folks stuff in here. I don't want it to sort of be a back and forth about every single thing folks put on the room. We'll have space for that later. I'd rather kind of collectively go and hear from folks what's coming up for you. Not everything you put up here is going to stick. Not everything we put up here, right, it's not going to look that way, but let's try and collectively get some stuff up here rather than, sort of share. So just to be efficient with the rest of our time. Okay, so James, anything else to comment on and to add to the doc, and then we'll move on to the next member.
Well, I guess one thing, I think it would be prudent to incentivize like small retail and small commercial as like stepping stones for businesses to get started and then move into that next big space. When Chuck Maroon was here in 2019 or 18, he told a great story about some little town in Michigan that had vacant downtown buildings, and the city put in like tuck sheds and rented them out for super cheap. And eventually some of those little startup businesses moved in to fill the downtown. And I see the core area as a place that, maybe a little business wants to get started, but they're not going to fill a whole warehouse that's existing there. So how do we incentivize really small units, as the theory being that it's a stepping stone?
Like incubator kind of startup vibes. Yeah. Okay.
And then my last one, which is not a part of business assistance, but more something that I would ask our body to work on over the next year, 2 years, is looking at the city providing a pathway for 6-story single stair buildings, which the state, I fully expect to go down this route of providing this pathway.
Say that one more time, James.
6-story
single stair.
egress.
that'll be.
It'll come down from the state for 4-story buildings. But the core area, because we allow building heights to be 6 stories, 65 feet, our land values are tied to that. And so, the kind of multifamily buildings that we can expect to go up to that building height are the ones like 180 Franklin and Platform, that are these gigantic buildings that fill up big lots. And we have a lot of really small lots in the core area.
Right.
And so if we're going to allow buildings to feasibly go up to 6 stories, we have to copy what New York and Seattle and Honolulu have already done and allow 6-story buildings, and it's going to take conversations with fire. So I guess I would just like for us to have some more focus and effort on that.
What does that mean, 6-story single stair? I'm not sure. I don't understand the terminology.
So buildings now over 3 stories, you need to have 2 modes of egress for any unit. And if you go up to 4 stories, so if you go up to 4 stories, you have to do that. But 3 stories, you can have 1 stair access, 4 or 6 units per level. But as soon as you do that 4th story, you got to have 2 stairs, which means a really big building.
Yeah, it's about project costs, right? It's about being able to, yes, yeah. It's a cost saving, it's a way to sort of like help these bigger projects pencil, right? Because,
Yeah.
It's also more livability.
yeah,
The design of the units can be, you'll see them in Europe where you have windows on three sides instead of everything looking like motels, specifically where it's just like a corridor and everybody's just sort of slotted on.
But with that comes added fire protection. So for additional fire safety measures, like additional sprinklers, limitation on the number of units per floor, often capped at 4 units per floor. So it's to help fire safety get to them quicker.
yeah.
And I don't want to put words in the words in the mouth of our building official, but they seemed open to it.
Yeah.
So we just need to have those conversations.
Thank you, James. Okay, who's up next? I can't see anyone online, so Kathy, what you got?
I just want to have good communication with the central business owners, and
Mhm.
understanding what impediments people are facing so that we can really think about that. I think our subcommittee did a good job in hearing from the most recent applicants and just keep that going. And then I think I mentioned last time, I would love to see the city take ownership perhaps of providing some arts spaces that are subsidized. I mean, we talked about affordable housing, but I think what we were talking about, how artists go to where the rents are cheap and then then it becomes cool and then they get pushed out. So should we, as we're developing, see artisans and artists in the space of finding creative ways to keep them there? And make it affordable for them so that there's a nice there.
Mm.
And then I'd also be curious to know more about what the city hall concepts are fitting for.
Yeah.
And there are some life safety issues developing housing very close to railroad tracks. And so thinking in terms of we put a parking structure there so that people do have a place to come and drive to and park, and then that the city owns and that can be used by everybody so that we can, now that we no longer require parking for a lot of these places, making sure that there is an ability for people who do come from a far-flung area that can't necessarily take public transportation to have a place to and utilize the downtown core. That's just part of the infrastructure. Those are the things that I think about.
Great. Thank you so much. Dawn.
Really, I want to see us make sure that we're supporting businesses in the core area in multiple ways. Supporting development in the core area of these businesses, making it attractive for our developers to come into those areas and develop those multi-purpose properties. We talked about the Les Schwab site, for Tom Cody to come in and build, really cool living spaces, but with maybe a market or an artisan spot or some really cool eclectic things. I'd like to just see the private and the public sector partner better with that and kind of help with that partnership financially. Everybody kind of talk nice and get together and bring some funds. So,
okay. Thank you. John, I see your hand up, and then we'll go to Dale. Go ahead, John. Can't hear you.
I am on mute. That's fun. Sorry, guys. Just a couple
okay, it's not
thoughts.
us. It's not us.
You'd think you'd have that figured out by now. I was thinking about what James said about the small business assistance and the impact on neighbors. And it does seem like adding some language in the program that mentions that as a positive contributing factor to being awarded funds would be worthwhile and not too difficult to add. And like Kathy said, obviously it's very subjective, but burden would be on the applicant to say, hey, this is how this project is going to be good for the people around us. And if that is factored into the scoring, I think that's a good idea. So I just wanted to second that. And also piggybacking, James, on what you said about the 6-story point access block buildings. I learned a lot from the Building a Better Bend presentation on that, which happened, I don't know, a few months ago. And I wonder if we can share that out. There's a really good presentation on the positive changes of having the single stair up to 6 stories that I think it would be good to push that forward with the city. So just second, wanting to engage in that. And perhaps we can, just for our own education, share. I think that presentation was recorded and, so quickly crash course and what that does. And that my final comment is just about the investment strategy overall. This is just kind of a big picture, minor comment, but I've observed that we are often spending a lot of time and energy and money on studies that are often not very revelatory. They don't tell us a lot that's new. I feel like the native intelligence of Borough and of advisory boards is, people that are engaged and have lived here a while kind of have a sense. So it's just an overall comment to be modest on the spending for new studies and analysis is that may not actually go towards the placemaking, but just give us a lot of pretty slides to look at, which I've just noticed over the years that's something that we spend a lot of energy and money on, and I don't know how much benefit there is. So this is just an overall comment and an observation. That's all I got.
All right. Thank you, John. My hope is that we are going to be able to hear from the ex officio folks, but we're going to start with CAB members first. So Dale, go ahead, then we'll take it to John, and then I think that will take us through all the CAB folks who are with us today, and I'll save my comments till the end. So let's go Dale, John, and then I think Rachel.
Okay, along the lines of Kathy's issue, I think it's very important that we identify the anchor tenants, so to speak. We know there's going to be a city hall somewhere. We know there may be an affordable housing project somewhere. I think, our primary goal really has to be, how do we get people to invest money in the district so that the district can have funds to do other projects to entice more development, getting that snowball rolling. And I think the sooner we know that, I think the sooner property owners will be able to develop plans and move ahead with them. I think the infrastructure and placemaking is really important. I'm really concerned about, if the funding goes ahead as anticipated for the Hawthorne Crossing, that where's it going to land, what's it going to look like, what's going to be there, and to get out ahead of that a little bit, because I'm just kind of concerned there's a disconnect between ODOT designing one thing that stops and then not having the rest of the corridor really thought out, or at least that end of the corridor thought out. I think nothing against Todd, but I think his suggestion that CAB could write a letter, regarding infrastructure in the core area is a bit symptomatic of the problem, that I think we really need to be kind of a little higher level of that, I think, on input on this. And it feels like the designs through the core area kind of get way out in front, and, we're, then sort of waving our hands going, wait a minute, has anybody thought about this? I think another important thing that could be very helpful for us is to coordinate a little more with the business association, have them, perhaps somebody from that, not necessarily you, Don, but the chair, maybe not the treasurer, come in and kind of give us their top 10 list. You could do it, but I think kind of having
You really want Kurt Alexander back in here?
love Kurt.
Bring him. Yeah.
Whoever wants to talk, but I think we should have I would love to hear what that group thinks the biggest issues are.
Yes.
And then I have a pretty good idea of what, number one, if Kurt shows up here. But I think it's a real issue, and nobody really wants to talk about it and stuff, but it's a big impediment.
Dropping the homeless. Too.
Okay.
Those are mine.
Okay, we're taking it to John. And I see other people with their hand raised. I can't fully see you, but I know someone will tell me. Okay, so let's do John, if you've got any comments, if he's still with us, John Highland. Just see if he stepped off. Okay, then let's go to Rachel and then Sarah.
Great. And so a lot of mine are somewhat duplicative, so I'll try to be succinct here, but I'll just kind of riff off of Dale, and someone else mentioned this too. I think it was Kathy. Excuse me, I'm sick here. The City Hall Plaza, and like trying to define, it's not just City Hall, it's the affordable housing, it's the plaza. We want to be part of that partnership. So we would love to be part, like whether it's at this meeting or somewhere else, like of like really catalyzing the identification of what's going to happen there and where, because I think it can be kind of ties into Hawthorne Bridge and the landings. I think a number of us have talked about the need for, a good landing on either side so we can have that proverbial connection from the east and the west side. And so I don't know who leads that urban planning effort. And I think that's been one of the discussions we've had. We kind of don't know who's on first for that, but I think it's critical to the success of that bridge is that we figure out what spaces are going to be on either side that make that bridge successful. We've talked some about the low car study, and I know I haven't been at all the meetings, but my colleagues have, that the low car study was not meant to be too much of a deep dive. So I don't know that it's going to get too deeply into this Drake Juniper connection. I think we still think, and a number of community visioning documents have pointed out that is a very important connection. So I know there's a lot of challenges with downtown and various other things. So I still think it's an important thing to continue to study. One thing we brought up in presentations to you all that might be something to consider is there's a parklets program, which is sometimes controversial in downtown, but that might be something to consider in the core area to activate the street. And then something that we'd love people to think more about, particularly in the core area where there's very limited opportunities for exactions for parkland, would be maybe privately owned public spaces, and how can that function and how can we partner with those? And then the only other thing I'll say, this is more of an admin thing, Jonathan. I was watching the meeting from last night. We're kind of loosely following the tiny TIFs. And I know, we obviously understand what they are, and they're an investment for long-term earning, but it's like almost a $50 million loss over 30 years in the near term, right? And so it's just like, I think we would like to understand, I'm assuming my board is going to ask me too, to understand, like, how is that impacting city services overarchingly in the near term? Like, because we see how it might impact us, right? But like, just thinking about that, we know it impacts the TIF because now platform may be moving, or the Les Schwab site might be moving over to that program, and just how that impacts the TIF monies or other things that we want to do here. And that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Sarah.
Thank you, and I'll be quick. I think I would probably second most of the things that were shared here today. I think, I guess just taking a more global look, this is a really impressive body of work with so much thought and just really creative ideas on how to leverage existing resources and bring new ones in. So just thank you, Jonathan, for all the work you put into this. It's truly impressive. From the chamber's perspective, I think we would echo the communication with local businesses, some of the conversations around the construction offset, to assist when things are happening and businesses may see decreased traffic. Any kind of assistance programs or engagement programs with local businesses to really shore up the entrepreneurial and startup phase of many of the area's businesses. And then a couple of different places you mentioned, like creating a revolving loan or some sort of another funding mechanism. And I would just maybe see if we could explore how to utilize other resources and to make the TIF bigger, if that's even possible, like utilizing some state resources or grant resources or other things just to help grow those pots of money as the TIF area kind of gets up and going. I don't know if that's even legal, but just thinking through how can we creatively start to deploy some resources with a relatively small bucket of resources.
Great. Thank you. Other folks online who I didn't see, Eric, I think I saw you. Are there other ideas, thoughts to capture in this moment from other folks who are online?
Hey, yeah, this is Eric at CET working from home with a little helper. Great comments. I don't really have a heck of a lot to add except on when we talk about transit. couple points. We're probably all familiar with mobility hubs. We probably don't need to be too strict in our thinking about transit design, whether it's Hawthorne Station or mobility hubs. We've got routes that are abutting this area on all sides pretty much. So we're ready to support whatever gets built out here, and we can enhance those transit facilities. Something like what Toby Marks is doing with mobility points. That's something smaller than a mobility hub. Coordinating the wayfinding so that people can find these transit connections. So elements like that, just offering, we're flexible. And then on the longer time horizon, Hawthorne Station might not exist in the same manner that it currently exists. So looking to provide better connectivity for those routes to this area, that's not necessarily plugging into Hawthorne Station as such. So.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd really appreciate everyone's thoughts and ideas and putting them in the room. I have a few that are, kind of plus ones, but and maybe some additional. So I think I have a kind of more like global big picture look at this. And so what I see when I look at the strategy is I see a whole lot of kind of like true economic development kinds of things that are embedded in this strategy. And so I very much appreciate that. I know that's an active conversation for City Council to have an economic development goal, but I think, I've said this and others have shared too, they're all connected, right? And so I appreciate what's in here. I see a whole lot of new things that are in here, right? And so I guess my question kind of goes to how do we stack the most impactful first, right? I think like we don't want to spread ourselves too thin, right? That's how you sort of like get mired in mediocrity. So I do think there's a ton here, and I think this will be an ongoing conversation, but honing in on the things that we think are the near term most impactful things, I think is going to be a real helpful funnel for us with a lot of this work. And so just kind of wanted to put that out there. I think I share the kind of like infrastructure concern is probably not the right word, but just sort of like how front and center and how far we have to go for the infrastructure needs of this district, right? We've talked a lot about Hawthorne, the landings, the full connected corridor. We've talked about the game plan for City Hall and where the plaza is going. I think that there's a need here for some more collective connecting of the dots, because if we're talking about Hawthorne connecting through downtown, crossing at Third, right? Those are really big pinch points and really big important conversations and probably tough conversations to have. Further, if the city is going to be moving City Hall, there's going to be a lot of new city property available downtown, right? And we've heard a lot about the parking issue. We know the parking thing is like a hot button topic around Hawthorne. And so I feel like there's this sort of like downtown core area kind of like chessboard that has all of these pieces that are very interconnected, and that we're kind of holding some of them, and some things are kind of over here. And I think, and I'm not sure if it comes from Burr, if it comes from City Council, but I'd like to see a bigger kind of like collective vision about here's how these pieces are all going to function and move, right? Here's the timing of those things. And then here's what our strategy is responding to and investments based on those pieces. So I hope that feels clear, but I think I am looking for like a little bit more cohesion between all of these connected pieces that are very active right now, for better or for worse, right? And so that's something I'd like us to kind of help move along and move forward if we're able to. And I think that's probably where I can leave it for now.
All right, so the next steps is in March. We want to start breaking this down further. We want to look at infrastructure and business development and really focus on that discussion. So in the interim, work on some more ideas, what's working, what's not. Nothing is off the table at this point. And then we also want to start working on that site assistance program and start getting your feedback, what's currently offered in Juniper Ridge, what you worked on 2 years ago with the development assistance program, and how can we start merging those two together. In April, we'll break it down to the housing development, entrepreneurship, and beautification. In addition, you will also be getting the first round of site-specific applications that we'll ask for your approval. part of the ORS 457 is we have to have public involvement at every stage of the TIF formation. So while we're not going to ask you, do you approve the projects? Do you approve what we're trying to do as borough? And so that'll be a little bit more clear then, but you'll see all 5 projects. To be determined, we might do an investment strategy summit with the other boards and commissions. It'll be like a dinner like we did last time. And then June 5th will be borough adoption or consideration. And then next, this is where I'm thinking something entirely different. So the reason you haven't gotten a May invite yet is we're thinking about doing a borough city council ribbon cutting for Second Street once the trees go in. And we were thinking maybe having an on-site CAD meeting. That way you could, participate, and then also a block party type thing, and start at Dogwood and then go up and down the street. Because 2 years ago you funded Dogwood, so what better, closing the loop? I'm trying to bring that in. So TBD for that.
Will we need a room?
I don't know yet.
If we do, Campfire has one.
Okay.
It will be a public meeting. We have all the public meeting room accessibility requirements. If it's a site visit, we'll talk about what.
Okay, because he does have like this setup in the room.
Okay.
So we could talk to Todd if we need.
There's a lot of logistics to go into it, but we're thinking a big ribbon cutting for council CAB to kick off the first project of borough in the core area. So
Bocce ball in the intersection.
So the business district does have a party every quarter.
Your people do?
My people.
BCD?
Yeah, we have a party every quarter.
Will you start forwarding me those, and I'll start coordinating with the chair to see if that's something that this body would like to participate in?
Yes, and I was just thinking that maybe it could be like a joint gig, because we have a list of all the business owners in the district that we could make sure we're attending this.
Yeah.
That sounds good. That's communication with us.
That's why I'm here and not back in my office spreading taxes.
You all know that last night the council advanced the 5 projects for Tiny Tip, right?
Yeah.
We asked for the staff to move forward with the next steps. So,
Exciting.
I don't know, I just got an email from Kurt Alexander about something and there was exclamation points and I haven't.
All bolds, all caps.
There's like, all my phone is blowing up and it's literally that group of people.
around the Tiny Tips.
Yeah. There was a TIF title somewhere in there and I'm like, okay, I can look at that later. So it's not my office blowing up. So yeah.
And project platforms in that mix.
Probably, yeah.
It's
a bunch
for the projects, and they'll have to, risk will rescind their MUPT should it move all the way forward.
Got it. All right. Well,
No.
I
yeah.
don't get to double dip.
No, but we don't get to double. Do we get anything out of platform then if they do a tiny tip, or does it all go?
It would be the TIF version, but the benefit about this program is it generates bonds and levies for the city.
Is that the platform
Park
project?
Rebate. It's a rebate of their property taxes in a similar way that MUFG was an exemption, but they do have to pay bonds and levies.
Yeah.
No, TIF doesn't, core area doesn't get anything more.
Are you the author of our goals for the exercise? I just love number 5, this idea of remove any preconceived notions existing.
Well, that's what communication told me to put today. They were like, it's like stifle creativity.
I need to get up every morning and tape that to my mirror. I mean, that's just a great start.
I know. That's the first.
The worst thing that can happen is someone can say no to you're crazy. That's what I wake up thinking every morning. I come with something really crazy and the worst thing that could happen is somebody could say no. Right? The best thing is somebody could say yes.
True that.
Right?
Yeah.
And just real quick for housekeeping, is the 3rd Thursday of every month okay moving forward?
That's what historically has
Yes.
been. So yeah.
Generally,
I kind of got that mixed up the last time. I was like, oh, I got it mixed up. But
there may be conflicts here and there. I can't promise, but
Good. All right.
Appreciate everybody, how thoughtful everybody is, in your engagement. So on behalf of the council.
Thank you for being here, Council Riley. Any final thought? We don't have public comment or anything like that today. So any other ideas, thoughts to close us out? Otherwise, we'll go ahead and adjourn.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Corey.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Have a nice night.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
That's like the orange.